African defense companies challenging the status quo with regards to European companies traditionally being suppliers and having the know-how in technology? How have we come to this point?
I think this is a process that has taken place over a number of years. For a long time now, we have been world leaders in the supply of certain kinds of technologies. But we've also been able to draw on many years of skill and expertise that's been built up because of South Africa's very unique history. The years of apartheid put us in a position where we were able to build a very, very strong defense industry, create huge technical capability and build skills that many other countries in the world were not able to build. And over the years since apartheid, the government has been creating an enabling environment which have allowed us to go out, take those skills, and compete with the best available in the world. And we're now at a point where in many cases we can do as well, if not better, than anybody else in the world can.
All right, at the exhibition in Cape Town, there's the unveiling of the Mbombe. What is it and why is it a feat?
The unveiling of Mbombe is really a very, very important point in the history of the South African defense industry. It's the first time in the world that an armored personnel carrier and infantry fighting vehicle of this nature has been fielded with the levels of ballistic protection that properly meet the realities of today's modern threats. There are many, many vehicles out there in the world that are competing for work in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and in other serious battlefields. But this is the first time that a vehicle is able to roll off the production line with the levels of ballistic protection that are able to defeat the threats in these battlefields straight off the production line. Most other competitors are able to add armor and add capability to their technology. But this vehicle is able to do it straight out of the factory.
All right, now with these armored vehicles suitable for conditions in Iraq and Afghanistan, some would argue, what's the point? Leaders are seeking to resolve these crises, to withdraw troops, to pursue peace. Where else is there a market for this sort of thing?
The Paramount Group has prided itself in not competing with the traditional suppliers who are supplying those markets. Our focus has been peacekeeping missions around the world and enabling developing countries to take up their responsibilities in peacekeeping missions throughout the African continent as well as throughout the world. And our technology, or the technology that we're developing in South Africa, is more suited for those requirements than it is for the traditional large volume, high conflict environments.
All right, now you've seen sales growth in the last few years of 20%. Your workforce has also grown. You've opted for what you call an in-country manufacturing model. Could you just explain that to us?
Well, again, South Africa brings to the global defense industry a completely new perspective. And we realize that in this country, we are not going to be the lowest cost manufacturers in the world. But we are one of the centers of excellence for technology development and industrialization. And as a result, we've made our technology so that it can be produced portably. And instead of insisting on filling factories only here in South Africa, we work with our customers in order to set up manufacturing, transfer skills, and set up factories in their own countries, so that we're not only transferring the technology for our specific products, but we're also enabling the development of defense industries in those countries.
All right, let's talk about synergies with the automotive industry in South Africa, which has developed great capacity in terms of innovation, research, technology, and has provided quite a fundamental basis for lucrative South African or well-made South African cars for lucrative markets abroad. What synergies are there in terms of your manufacturing capabilities and the automotive industry and the manufacturing that's done in the country?
The South African government's investment in developing an automotive industry in this country is very admirable, and it certainly has gone a long way to make sure that not only the skills but also the subcontractor base and the supply base that we need to go out and be competitive globally is available. There are many, many synergies, and the synergies continue to expand because as we try hard to develop commercial off-the-shelf approaches to the manufacture of these very sophisticated vehicles. So absolutely, there are synergies, and the synergies will continue to develop, not just in us absorbing capability from the automotive industry, but also from us developing capability which we're putting back into the automotive industry.
Okay, we have a guest host. His name is Kwebu Legrandje, and he'd like to ask you something.
I mean, I think the one thing that comes to mind when I look at your business, or I look at this business, is that there are certainly these great pockets of excellence where entrepreneurship has just taken what has been in South Africa and where it's been extrapolated and you've been able to make success out of that. I mean, another example would potentially be something like medical isotopes, which we kind of world leaders as far as South Africa is concerned. Do you think that the defense industry should become a priority for government? And if that should happen, I mean, what kind of volumes of people could we potentially see the industry attracting and potentially employing long term?
That's really a very good question and good observations. Because of our unique history, we do have a military culture in this country. And we also have had the privilege of building the skills base, which most other countries would not have had an opportunity to. Unfortunately, we did go through a dark period in our history where it appeared as if government felt that the defense industry did not have a priority. This has changed. Things have moved on, and the current government is encouraging the growth of the defense industry, and it appears very prominently in the latest IPAP documentation issued by government. So there is no doubt that it is a focus. There's also no doubt that it is going to be an engine for growth and development in South Africa and on the continent. I've always been a great believer in the fact that the defense industry in South Africa is an African competence. It's an asset of the whole continent. And there is no example in the world of any economy that has emerged from a developing economy to a developed economy without a strong defense industry. So absolutely, this is a priority. We hope that government will make it more of a priority, and we certainly see that this is an industry where South Africa can lead the rest of the world and where we can continue to grow from strength to strength in the years to come.
Ivor, a final question. You spoke about beneficiation, skills transfer, localizing manufacturing and production. Now, talking about the context in the rest of the African continent, the issue is that defense budgets in Africa are exorbitant, often outweighing human development budgets such as education and healthcare, and that creates a bit of a moral dilemma. As we talk about growing in the industry, growing the footprint of the Paramount Group, how do you navigate some of these ethical questions on a continent that needs innovation that could come from this sector, but at the same time needs a curb on defense spending because of the horrors of war that we've seen on this continent?
First of all, the Paramount Group is a very proudly African company, but we operate globally. And yes, we do operate in Africa, and we operate extensively in Africa. We see the increase in defense spending on this continent as a huge positive. Not a positive just because it creates business for us, but because we can see African leaders starting to understand that without stability, without peace on the continent, there can be no growth and there can be no development. And in the past, conflicts on this continent have been ignored, or they have been left to outsiders to deal with. The increase in defense spending is an indication of the fact that African leaders are finally starting to take this requirement for stability into their own hands. A lot of the increase in spending is being put into peacekeeping. Africa today is one of the bigger contributors to peacekeeping around the world, and a lot of the equipment that's being procured is going in to support African countries to fulfill their mandates on UN missions, while at the same time African peacekeepers are starting to deal with peacekeeping on this continent. So we actually see this as a positive, not a negative. And I think that within the context of defense spending, a huge portion, or a much bigger portion, is going to peacekeeping than most people actually realize.